And when we started this publishing thing a couple of years ago, the idea was to feature Midwest musicians and their writing. And so when my partner Parker and I talked about it a little, in the early days, we were like, well, where do we want this thing to go? And we threw out some names and some people. Would it be cool if Charlie Parr would do a book? And sure enough, Charlie Parr came and sat beside the book. And the end goal was like, wow, we could get Greg Brown. So I got it. That'll never happen. We didn't even talk to people, and that'll never happen. Greg, yeah, I don't think, but it ended up happening. And the book, you're all holding it. It's a beautiful testament of this gentleman's life and his passion, his art. And there's a line in the sentence. There's a sentence in the introduction by Seth Abbott that kind of sums it up. A kid at a restaurant drawing God with a bunch of crayons. And I think that somehow says a lot more than I can say about how much I love his music. So let's just give a warm welcome for a bunch of stories and some beautiful words from Mr. Greg Brown.
Oh, good evening. I've never done anything like this, and this could be it. My wife, I'm married to Iris DeMint, and I've got a little cabin behind our little house, and she's always telling me I'm getting too many books. Well, I'm going to bring her up here. Let her see what too many books looks like. I want to say thanks to my friend Mei-Ling Shaw, who she's the woman in Iowa City that put all this together. I could never have done it, and it was nice of Seth to write a little something. I live in Iowa City, Iowa, and I have for a while now. And it's just full of writers and books. I remember I used to go to some writers' workshop parties way back. A lot of writers, I played at a joint called The Mill in Iowa City, and a lot of writers came down there, mostly to drink, but they would listen to a few songs. But I went to a couple writers' parties, and I thought, what's wrong with these people? They're writers, but they can't talk. So I never thought I would get around to getting a book out. But anyway, here it is. And I'm going to read you a few of these little prose pieces that I wrote for it. And then there'll be a question and answer period if you've got anything you want to know. I probably won't know it, but I'll try. And then I'll sing a couple songs, and then that'll be it. So thank you for coming out tonight. I came up here to the Driftless Books, I don't know, some years ago. Wandered around, I thought I'd died and gone to heaven. Such a great place. And the name Driftless, too. I've always liked the Driftless area. It's getting a little too popular, if you ask me. I see driftless a little bit too much. But even down in Iowa, there's some pretty trout streams up in northeast Iowa that I've fished a lot. And there's a creek there called North Bear. Pretty good little creek. But now there's like 6 cabins along one part of it, and I don't know, the whole world's getting spiffed up. I'm glad I'm old. I don't get along that well with Spiffy, really. That's true. Well, let's see. This is the first time I've seen this book, so I don't really know what's in here. But I was going to read you a few of these little pieces. Well, I'll just start at the beginning. most of these stories I wrote in here are true, as far as I know. I don't have the world's greatest memory. This is when I was starting out in New York City. I went out there in 1969. Thought I wanted to be a folk singer. And I hung around the village quite a while. And eventually I got a little job at a place called Gertie's Folk City. And that's what this story is kind of about. I had been in New York for a few months playing the Hoot Nights and various little clubs around Greenwich Village. I had been on the street for 6 weeks or so, sleeping on a bench in Washington Square Park, or sometimes up by Penn Station. There was a low wall along the street there, backed by evergreen bushes, so you could lean against and sleep for a while. Sooner or later, a policeman would wake you up with his stick and tell you to move on. I had a couple $100 in my pocket when I got to town. I was 19 and had never been in a big city, had never seen people begging on the street. In a few weeks, I managed to give all my money away. After that, I sold the few books I had in my bag at bookshops. I had been living on one sausage sandwich a day for a while. They were pretty good, too. I was thinking I probably better get out of town and get back home somehow. One hot day walking through the village, I saw a guy I knew, Bart. He was the house act at Gertie's Folk City. He told me he was leaving town, going back to Oklahoma, and how would I like to have his job. He told me the gig was to play 6 nights a week, do an opening 20-minute set, and then introduce the main act, and sign people up for the Hoot Night. I signed a lot of people up, Loudon Wainwright, a lot of people. Dominic Chianese, who was later on that gangster TV show, The Sopranos. He was awful. It's a good thing he got into acting. Introduced and signed people up for the Hoot Night Monday, if that. And the pay was $50 a week. I said, yeah, I'd like that. He told me I could start on Friday, and that he would introduce me to Mike and Johnny Porco, who ran the place. The next day, Thursday, I met Bart at Folk City. He introduced me to Mike and Johnny. Johnny gave me a $50 advance and told me to be at the club at 6 the next evening. I went down to the subway and caught the train for Far Rockaway. There was a beach there and a few small shacky restaurants. When I got there, I ordered fried clams and a Miller beer. I ate the clams and drank the beer and lay down on the beach. I guess I must have been pretty worn out. I woke up late that night with a badly sunburned face and arms. I knew I had missed my first night. A week I would be fired and would have to get out of town, and that I wouldn't be back. I'd left my guitar at Gertie's in the basement. Saturday afternoon I went back to pick it up. No one seemed to be around. The back door was open. I went in and went down the narrow staircase to the basement, got my guitar, and was walking away from the club when I felt somebody grab my arm. It was Johnny. Hey, he said, why you no show up? We no can use you. Your first fight, you no show up. Your first night, you no show up. You fired. Why you no show up? I told him that I'd been living on the streets and not been eating, and had gone out to Far Rockaway and had a beer, a big meal and a beer, and had fallen asleep on the beach. So I was sorry, and I was going home. Johnny stared at me for a long minute, his hand still gripping my arm. He said, you come with me now. He put his arm around my shoulder and led me back into the club. He told Maria, the cook, to make me a big plate of pasta and give me a beer. He told me that Gertie's was moving soon to a new place, only a few blocks away, and that I could have a day job cleaning out the new place and a room to sleep on the second floor. You stay. You'll be okay now. You leave your guitar here. I remember cleaning out the new club, the new Gerties. The old Gerties had been on West 3rd, and they just moved over to West 4th and 5th Avenue, I think. Anyway, it had been closed for a long time. It had been Tony Pastor's supper club, and then it had been a strip joint. And my job was to clean the whole place out, which involved going down to the basement and getting big boxes full of 8x10s of strippers and putting them out on the curb. And then scraping the bar with like a paint thing, just the crud from the air in New York, being closed for a few years. It was pretty bad, but I felt like I was living in a palace. This one's called Sawmill. It's about my mother's father, who was, he ran a sawmill in Southern Iowa when I was a little boy. He had been a brakeman on the old steam engine railroad. And then when the diesels came in, he got an old locomotive and set it on a little section of track and ran a saw off of it. Grandpa ran a sawmill with an old steam engine locomotive set on a short section of track. A long belt came off the engine and powered the 6-foot saw blade. He'd been working on the railroad until the diesels came in right after the war. The railroad men didn't like the diesels. Grandpa said, "You just turn them on and they go." So he got a hold of an old locomotive and started his sawmill. They'd go out and cut mostly oak anywhere they could get a few. He had an old rusted truck with no windows they called the Jammer. It had a big winch and cable mounted on the back they used to drag the trees out to the road to load them on a log truck and haul back to the mill. One day it was just him and me back in the woods. I guess I was 9 or so. He had cut down a huge oak, lopped off the branches, gotten the cable around it, and we were headed back out to the road. There was no flat ground around there. The Jammer sounded like it might blow a gasket, straining to get up a hill. The dragging oak dug up a nest of ground bees, bumblebees, and they came after us. Grandpa said, "Hold on, Gregory," and he gave it the gas, and away we went. The oak dancing around like a crazed monster from hell, knocking brush and young trees flying like a tornado. I held on tight. I was yelling at the top of my lungs. I thought it was so fun. We made it out to the road, no stings. The cable held. There were a couple guys waiting by the truck. They were laughing and swearing. They'd never seen anything so goddamn funny in their lives, they said. Grandpa laughed a little too. Then they got the oak onto the truck, and we headed back to the mill. I like going down to the old mill because back then my dad was a preacher. He was a Pentecostal preacher, and kind of a different Pentecostal preacher, but we'll get into that maybe later, we'll see. But I like going down to the mill because, we had church on Wednesday night, Friday night, Sunday morning, Sunday night, and then there were revivals to revive us because we're also exhausted from so much church. And there was speaking in tongues and people flopping out on the ground. I loved it. It was good religion for a kid. It was exciting. Later we became Methodists. My dad started reading. Well, he just didn't like something about the there was a lot of hate back then in the evangelical church, unlike now. But gospel quartets came through. I loved all that. But anyway, we moved back to the Midwest. We were living in southern Kansas. We moved back to Iowa, and Pa went to theological seminary in Dubuque, and he had two churches. And the first thing I noticed after we left the Open Bible Church was in the Methodist church, people would fall asleep. Farmers mostly, tired. But the church was like, when people sang, it sounded like cats mewing to me. In the Pentecostal church, people really sang. They sang like they were afraid of hell, which they were. And so that was a whole different deal coming back to the Midwest. Well, I'm just gonna kind of go through here and see. Oh, here, this is appropriate. Oh, well, I'll read this one. I lived in Iowa City for a long time, and then I moved around for a while. But in Iowa City, there was a really well-known folklorist named Art Rosenbaum, who was also a great painter and painted pictures of people playing traditional music. He was great. And he didn't get tenure, is that what they call it? They refused him tenure because they told him he was playing too much music. So he moved down to Georgia, Athens, and he started collecting down there, but he was great. And we had another guy named Harry Oster, who was another world famous folklorist. He wrote a song called Living Country Blues. So Iowa City was a good town in a lot of ways. Well, this is a little piece about art that I wrote. Art Rosenbaum, who was a great, that's getting a little ringy. Can you hear that? Am I getting too close to it? Maybe I don't. Maybe I'm getting up on it.
Yeah.
I'm back off. Okay. Art Rosenbaum, who was a great folklorist, painter, musician, and taught at the University of Iowa, another folklorist, Keith Dempster, or Harry Oster and Keith Dempster, who started the mill, brought a lot of traditional musicians in from all over. I saw a lot of different music that those three brought into the area. They played at the mill or one of the small college halls. It was great. Rosenbaum and I became friends, and he wanted to go down to Hackamarny. That's the area in southern Iowa where I live. That used to be true out in the country, probably from southern Iowa on down. Like, there weren't many towns, and just your area would be called Hackamarny or Turkey Scratch or whatever. And somebody asked my grandpa once what Hackamarny meant. Maybe it was Art Rosenbaum, but Grandpa just said, that was just a tail end of nothing. Rosenbaum and I, he wanted to go down to Hackamarny, so we went down there, and he played with Grandpa and Grandma, and he was really a good banjo player and fiddle player. He had started doing a lot of recording around Iowa. In fact, he and Al Murphy made a whole record of old songs they collected. Here in Iowa, Art and I were riding back to town, and I remember he said to me, I know a lot of folk singers who'd give their left nut for your roots. That's what he said. We had jammed down there, Grandpa played fiddle and Grandma played the pump organ, and we really got to go. This guy named Buzz Fountain, who was a great fiddle player. There was a lot of great music down there. I ended up on that record that Art made because one of the times when he and I went down to Hackamarny, and I was very young, Art recorded me and Grandma Connie singing an old Civil War song called Two Little Boys. Ever hear that? What? If anybody feels like sleeping later, I'll sing it too. Grandma had always sung that for me at bedtime down there, so we did that song. He ended up on that record that won the Grammy. I've got it around here somewhere. I loved Art, and I loved playing with him. The question of tenure came up at the university, and he didn't get it. He was in the art department and taught painting. The word was that he spent too much time with his music, and they didn't give him tenure. I thought you guys are being really dumb, and someday you'll know it. He went down to the University of Georgia in Athens, and he stayed there until his death. Art did a lot of collecting in Georgia and in the South in general, and put out a collection of his recordings that won the Grammy for traditional folk, and he kept painting. A lot of his paintings had to do with music. You know, he would go to the musician's house and record them, and his wife Margot, who was a great photographer, would take some photos, and using his memory and using these photographs, he would often do a painting, just beautiful paintings, it's true.
Trying to troubleshoot those.
Nice.
Well, the next piece in here is one I wrote for my wife, and I told her I'd written a little piece, and she said, no, you can't use that in the book, which I fully expected. And I put it aside, and then about a week later, she said, well, she decided I could use it in the book. So here it is. You a lot of times don't even know why you do what you do. I was singing at the Lions Folk Fest. I had met Iris a time or two here and there at gigs around the country. She was playing at the fest too. She and I were standing over at the edge of the stage. She was about to go on stage to sing a song or two, John Prine. She'd been eating her supper holding a paper plate. She was about half done, and she handed me her plate and said, here, you finish this. I just stood there staring at the plate after she had gone. I just stood there looking at her plate. I had been really sure that I was never going to get married again. Now I was pretty sure I was. You don't take someone's plate and finish it unless you know you're getting married. I didn't even know why I knew what I did, but I did. And I'm so glad I did, and that she did, and that we still do. Well, this one is about Birch Tree, which that's where my dad was from, Birch Tree, Missouri. It's way down in southern Missouri, and you can spit into Arkansas from there. And Paul was a hillbilly. He shot snakes out of trees. And I remember one time with him, we were out on a river down there, the Current River, I think. Southern Missouri is full of springs and rivers. And we were out on the Current River, and I'd waded out onto a little gravel bar, little island in the river. And I got out there, and there was a cottonmouth, which is a poisonous snake, coiled up at the other end of that little island there. And I remember I took out my pocket knife. I don't know what I thought I was going to do with that, but I had a pocket knife. And I remember my dad saying, "Man, don't you move, Gregory." And he was probably 15 feet away, I'd say. He picked up a rock, about a hand-sized rock, splattered snake. He was a hillbilly. Well, this is about Ella Mae, who was his mother, and David, who was his father. Southern Missouri, the Ozarks, big spring country, the edge of Birch Tree, a quiet little town, peaceful, just a few stores. My dad's folks had an acreage there, a big strawberry patch, I'd say about 5 acres. They had a farm nearby for many years and then got old and moved to town, close to town anyway. Ella Mae, my grandmother, was a strong, robust woman. She exuded peace like a sky with drifting clouds. Most of her life, she wrote poems about the Ozarks and journals full of notes about birds and sassafras tea and all the flowers. David, my grandfather, was a wiry little guy. He always looked like he might start guffawing, but rarely did. They worked a patch with a big black workhorse, Prince by name, a steady and stalwart companion. Sometimes Grandpa would let me ride on Prince's back when we go down to the woodlot with the wagon to haul firewood back up to the house. Prince was so big and I was so small, my legs stuck straight out, no bend at all. I felt like a king up there on Prince's wide back, watching the world of grass and garden dirt and fence go by. I hoped the ride would last forever, and a lot of days it did, or close enough. I wasn't planning on going down to the pond where all those cottonmouths hung out anytime soon, or any other time. Not unless my dad was with me. He could shoot a snake a long way off, dead. We used to have a thing in southern Iowa. There was a little town called Selma. We used to have a jam there. All the musicians from around that area would come, and there'd be a potluck, and then we'd all sit around and play. I remember the Pantsuit Twins, especially two rather large women who always wore matching pantsuits, and they both could play the heck out of the banjo. There were a lot of people like that. Buzz Fountain, I think I mentioned him. There's a little piece about the Selma Jam. My mom started playing guitar when she was pretty young, when you used to buy a guitar from the Sears catalog. I was 12 or so when she taught me the basic chords. There were a lot of jams in Hackamore. There was a guy named Buzz Fountain who played fiddle. There were so many musicians down there. Uncle Roscoe played guitar. My Uncle Frank played mandolin. Franklin Miller made a film about it. I had been on KU9 and talked a little bit about all the music down there. The DJ from that show, Phil Nussbaum, went down there with some guy with a recorder. And they made 6 shows just based on the music from that area. Well, this one's about, looks like it's about the Open Bible Church I mentioned down there in Kansas. Looks like that's what this is about.
What's it?
My dad left the church, it must have been in '66. We were in Kansas and he was at a Pentecostal church. He seemed to weary of that whole style of religion, so we quit. We lived down there about 3 years. We went back up to Iowa to a little town called Earlville, which is kind of up around Dubuque. My dad went to the theological seminary in Dubuque, and my mother went to college. Paul was working at a church in Earlville, and he ended up getting his theological degree. Then we moved up to the first job he got at a Methodist church in Lime Springs, Iowa, up by the Minnesota border. You see, when we moved back to Iowa, we became Methodists. In Kansas, the music had been really lively, hand clapping, rolling in the aisles, speaking in tongues, all that. Then we came back to Iowa and moved into this little Methodist church in Earlville. I remember when I first started going to church, well, I guess I already told this whole story. When I first started going to church, people would fall asleep, all the farmers just sitting there. I was shocked because in Kansas, you could have been drinking for 3 days and partying and then going to church, but you were not going to go to sleep. That would not happen. It was so different. It was so quiet and kind of peaceful. Paul got a little loose after leaving the Pentecostal church. He started wearing a beret and was just always kind of a wild dresser. Where I got my sense of fashion from my dad. When he got his church in Lime Springs, he was looking at the Bible as a myth. Like sermons, his sermons kind of changed, and boy, nobody wanted to hear it. So we quit the church at the end of my junior year, and we moved back down to Earlville. My mother taught high school. Pa started working for an electrician, and life changed. Once we left the church, we started having poetry readings at our house. And Ma would have bottles of wine around. She was like a bird out of a cage. She was teaching high school, and they all just loved her. That's true. That's one of the hardest roles, I think, that I've seen in my life, is being a preacher's wife. Lord have mercy. Later on there, after high school, and a couple of years later, I had a little trio. We moved out to Las Vegas. There was a guy named Buck Ram out there who'd started a band called The Platters. Only you, and all those kind of songs. He'd written all of this. Anyway, Paul Marsh and I went out there. That's kind of the story of that trip. I'm 20, sitting barely on a piano bench. Cheap little blonde spinnet with Buck Ram, a large man and founder of The Platters, writer of Only You, The Great Pretender, and a lot of other songs. We're at his compound in Vegas, me and my friends, Paul and Marcia. We're a trio we have no name for yet. Marcia knew of Buck somehow and had sent him our demo tape. He invited us out to his place. Vegas was quite a quiet little town back then. Comparatively, it was too. Not yet the world's largest boombox. This was in 1970. Buck was searching for the new Platters and was coaching us on how to achieve blend. It was almost a mystical term to him. We had to achieve blend. He would let us know when we got there, if we got there. Meantime, he and I were writing songs together for some of the other bands and solo artists he had in development. We wrote a song called Why in the Name of God, and another one called Like Snow on the Mountain. Truly awful songs. He wrote most of them, and I added a few phrases now and then. I never did know his real name, or I guess I should say his original name. I'm pretty sure it wasn't Buck. He told us that he wrote The Great Pretender when he was on the toilet in the Flamingo. He told us a lot of interesting stories at the supper table, his mouth full of mashed potatoes and peas. Kind of hard to understand what he was saying sometimes. He let us stay at the compound when he was around. When he left to go to LA, which was often, we stayed in the cheapest motels. I worked in a car wash and had the pleasure of helping clean both Elvis and Diana Ross's limos. Hers was pink. Well, I guess we never achieved blend, but we had a good time trying. One night at one of the big casinos, the spotlight shone suddenly on the table where we were having supper, and a disembodied voice shouted, "Please welcome the hot new young band of Mr. Buck Rams, the Comstock Load." So then we had a name. But we didn't use it long. Having failed at blend, we were shown the door and went over to LA and auditioned in Hollywood for the Holiday Inn circuit, and soon found ourselves driving to Racine, Wisconsin for what turned out to be a 9-week engagement. Winter was coming, and not many bands wanted to spend it there.
Yeah, and instant legacy in there.
Well, that might be about. Here's one. There's a couple more little stories I got.
You think so?
This is called Making Records. When I do look back, it was hard to get going, doing what I wanted to do, playing music and writing songs. But once I got that I wanted to write songs and play them here and there, I ended up getting to do that for quite a long time.
Yeah.
I didn't want to mess with the music business much when I was a young man. Out in Vegas and New York, I got a pretty good look at the music business. I wasn't too impressed. So I started my own label. I didn't have to deal with anybody telling me, you're going to record this song or you need to do more of this. I just made the records I wanted to make. And Bo Ramsey taught me how.
The crowd. Just right.
Well, I'll read you one more little piece here. This is called Allen Ginsberg. It started with the William Blake album back in 1985. Having started Red House, I had the freedom to do what I wanted. I decided I wanted to make an album setting William Blake poems to music. I told Bob Feldman, who ran Red House, to get a copy of this to Allen Ginsberg. I really like him and he loves Blake. So Bob did. I never heard from anybody. When Allen Ginsberg died, I think it was 1997, one day I got a big package in the mail, and there's a letter in there from Ginsberg's secretary. He said that while Allen was dying, he asked to hear the Blake album. They actually played it a lot. He included a manuscript of Allen's Blake lectures that he had given at the Viroqua Institute in Boulder. It was all typed out with things crossed out. It was his own lectures as he had written them out. It had never been printed anywhere. I'm sure there were copies, but I was stunned. It was really quite a present. I think that's one of the really important things about music. It can mean so much for people you have never met. Well, thank you. I'd be more than willing to answer some questions if anybody has any you want to ask. Yeah.
I'm just wondering if you have any stories from your tour with, is it Ani DeFranco back in...
That bitch?
Yeah.
No, that was fun. I had become friends with Ani. Some years before that, she was just starting out. I was at a folk festival somewhere, and she was standing off to the side. I hadn't really noticed her. She came up, kind of pushed me and said, "What does a person have to do to get to meet you?" I said, "Well, you just did it." So she and I became friends, and then when I can't remember what album she was doing, but she invited Gillian Welch and David Rawlings and me to go out and tour with her. I don't think I'd ever been on a bus tour. I hated it. I never knew what that was like. It's like being dead. The ceiling's right here. Can't go to the bathroom on a bus. I don't know if you knew that. Oh, you can pee, but that's it. And then you roll into some town at like 4 a.m. and check into a motel. So that part of it wasn't fun, but the musical part was very fun. I really loved playing with Ani. And we used to do a song she'd written called Fuck You. And You're Something. Untouchable Heart.
No.
She liked me to sing that one. We had a lot of fun, and I had never done a bus tour, and I thought it'd be really fun. It wasn't really very fun, but the music was I thought was really good. I love getting to know David and Gillian a little bit, so it was good. Anybody else want to ask me?
Yeah, I got a question.
Yeah.
Yeah, did you ever find Rex Ross' daughter?
Oh yeah, I found her. That bitch. No, I never did. But I met a guy out in the Northwest, out on one of those islands, Bainbridge. Is that an island out there?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was playing out there, and I met this guy. I think it was from Copper Canyon Press, which there's probably some of those are in here somewhere. But yeah, he had written, or his company anyway, had put out a pretty good sized biography of Rexroth. And there wasn't a lot in there about the daughters. He told me one was a movie producer and one was something else. That's about all they knew. But I remember writing that song, and some songs come very quickly. Like, I've written a lot of songs in 15 minutes or something. Others are not like that. And I started Rexroth's Daughter, and I think I'd written 9 or 10 versions of it. And I got really frustrated. Finally, I thought, well, heck with you. I wadded them all up and threw them in my trash can in my little study. And my middle daughter, Consti, came in. She was over, I think she'd left the house by then, but she came over to do her laundry or something. Anyway, she looked in the study and she saw that wadded up paper. And she got it out and she read it. And she said, who wrote this? She knew who wrote it. I mean, it's my handwriting. I said, well, I wrote it, and it didn't turn out. She said, you have to finish this song. You have to. Well, when your daughter tells you something like that, there you go. So I went ahead and finished it. I never thought I got it quite right, but anyway, I did what I could with it. And I really loved Rexroth's poems when I was a younger man. I read him a lot. Kenneth Rexroth was at the reading when Allen Ginsberg first read Howl. Gary Snyder was there too. And Rexroth wept. So I always loved that image of him. And I loved his poems, some of them were pretty long, but and he had poems about his daughters up in the mountains in California. He was teaching them the constellations and beautiful poems. And I always wondered, well, with them, what happened? So then I tried to write that song. Yeah.
A lot of us, we kind of migrated into poetry through List One Cherries.
Well, that's good. I hope.
Just curious about some posts you've been reading lately, people at your book stands.
Oh, reading now. I've been reading a lot of this guy, Sebald, the German guy.
W.G.
Sebald, the Rings of Saturn, The Emigrants. It's like being put in a trance or something to me when I read him. I don't know what it is about him, but a lot of times I'll read one of his books and then I'll start some other book and I'll think, I don't think so. And I'll go back and get another Sebald book. But I love reading. I read a lot. As far as poets, for me, going way back, there's a Peruvian poet named Vallejo, who he stuns me too. And I like to go back and read the old French poet Villon, who was quite a character. I've always loved Dr. Williams, Carlos Williams. A lot of poets I loved. And I started reading poetry when I was a little boy. My mother actually read Blake poems to me when I was little. E. Cummings, I really wanted to be E. Cummings for quite a while. I wrote everything in small case and turned words around. And then I had a Dylan Thomas period, The force that through the green fuse drives the flower, drives my green egg. Stuff like that.
I'm still in that phase.
Yeah, I still love him too. And Blake, of course. One thing to me, when I was first getting to know something about poetry and at the same time loving music, I really never made any differentiation between songs or music and poetry. To me, it felt just the same. And when I heard good poets read, I would say they were singing. It was obvious, So that whole connection to me was just just felt right, you know. And you know, I have to say sometimes, because songs there's songs and poetry, but sometimes certain singers who I won't mention, but are called poets, and if you read their lyrics, I don't know what they're doing, but they're not writing poetry. But you know, other ones, I think the whole thing can happen at the same time too. So yeah, I love it all, and I did since I was little. It's popped out like that. So anybody else? Yeah.
When was the last time you felt awe?
I felt awe probably yesterday. You know, awe is pretty. I remember walking out last night or the night before. The full moon had come out. I was just down there in my backyard, and you don't have to slow down very far to realize that we are all, if we could ever get so we can see it, or surrounded by awe every day of our lives, just full of awe of one kind and another. Yeah.
In the bookstore, right?
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah.
That's right.
Anybody else got any?
Real quick, you touched on songwriting earlier.
Uh-huh.
I was actually going to ask you a question, but outside of the Rexroth piece, do you germinate ideas? I mean, you don't write every song in 15 minutes, I'm assuming.
Oh God, no.
Right.
No, a lot of them take a long time.
What's your general approach to songwriting? Do you like?
I wait. I've learned to wait. I've learned to try to be open, and I've learned to wait. Because I've learned if I try to direct that, whatever that is, if I decide, well, I think I'm going to write some jazzy love songs, not a chance. If I wait, then whatever songs want to come in, then they'll come in. You know, some good and some not good, but they'll come. And so I've gotten real good at waiting. Although I have noticed since I quit touring, I retired like 4 years ago now from touring, and I noticed once I did that, for me, touring and writing and performing were all kind of one thing. Even the recording, I would say it was. But once I stopped touring and performing, I don't write nearly as much as I used to, because I think all those things for me were kind of one thing. Plus, maybe I already said whatever it was I had to say. I don't know. But I've always loved it. You know, I always loved music and songwriting. And I really didn't know for a long time if I was going to be able to make a living at it. I mean, I spent 10 or 12 years playing in bars where nobody listened at all until maybe the fourth set. And then they either wanted to listen or they were too drunk to move. It took me quite a while to get going. And after I joined the Prairie Home Show, that made it much easier for me to tour around the country, because that show back then in the 80s was a very popular show. And it was interesting working with Garrison. He was sort of like somebody from another planet or something. But it was a great soul, great storyteller. And he thought he could sing. No, I tell you, Garrison did pretty good on the old hymn tunes. He did all right at that. Anybody else?
Have you seen?
Is that it?
I got one. You
Okay.
love some of the fishing imagery in your songs. And do you actually fish? Did you retire to fish more? And what's your favorite?
No, by the time I retired, my knees were shot. And I had to have 2 knee replacement surgeries. So I still fish, but I can't get out in the little creeks and go wading across them like I used to. But I just fish very slow now. But no, I always loved fishing. My dad took me fishing when I was a little boy. And I caught my first trout, a little trout stream somewhere. I was so happy, and I had the trout. And there was a log between where I caught him and where my dad was, and I went over the log, holding my fish, and he got away. And my father said, "You've been trying to catch that fish ever since. No, I've always loved fishing. Yeah, I like fishing a lot. And by the way, speaking of books, there's a guy, he's died now, which is really bad. He didn't live that long. There was a guy named Jeffrey Skeet, Skeate, who lived in Decorah, and his wife, and he actually for a few years ran a bookstore down there. But he wrote 3 books I can think of fishing stories about the Driftless area. And he's like one of my very favorite fishing writers ever. It's hard to find his books, but sometimes you can. Skeate. One was called Familiar Ground. One was a book about winter fishing. And there was another one too. But if you like fishing or like fishing books, I'd really suggest looking for Jeffrey Skeet.
Is Bill Morrissey a fly fisherman?
Yes, he was, and Bill was more of a preparer to fly fish. He used to really frustrate me because, you know, we didn't see each other that often. I'd be playing out in New England, and we'd get together, and he knew a lot of rivers out there, but he was a perfectionist. And he fished with a silk fly line. The only guy I ever knew that did that. I think you have to keep it wet or something. I mean, besides when it's in the river. And his fly books were like arranged by size and da-da-da-da-da-da. And when we were going fishing, it would take him forever to get ready to go. And I tended to just throw a rod in the back and a little box of flies. But I got, you know, I would just wait. And Bill was a good fisherman, actually. He was a very good and very precise fly fisherman. Yeah. And Bill, he was like that as a musician. Bill's one of the musicians I knew that a lot of musicians I met kind of had a gift for it. You know, they'd pick up something and in 2 days they'd be playing it. That was not Bill. Bill really had to work really hard to play guitar and to sing, but he did, and he turned into being really good at both of them. And he was very funny too. He said one time, I think we were looking for a little river out there somewhere in New England, but I said, well, Bill, I think we missed a turn or something. And he said, well, Greg, the map is broken. Anybody else got
You think we'll get another record out of you someday?
No,
or is
I'm
it
done.
over? It's over.
I mean, I might do some more kind of home recording, and I've thought about doing that and putting up a little website or something, but that would be it. Yeah. For musicians, unfortunately, these days, you're making streaming, whatever they're called. You know, our musicians are not getting paid for their CDs or for their songs. And I don't know how long that can go on. I mean, we don't ask plumbers to come fix the toilet and say, here's a nickel. But that's what's happening to musicians. The young musicians, I know I worry about them because when I was starting out, I mean, I could make some money doing a gig, then I could sell a few CDs or tapes or whatever. And you could kind of put a living together that way. But for the younger musicians now, without that, without being able to make some money from the songs they wrote and made this seat, I don't know what's going to happen. But I think recording-wise, I probably made way too many records, but it's too late now.
You know.
Greg, do you have a Peter Strusko story?
Oh, Peter. Oh, Peter was a beautiful soul. He was a big soul. I feel Peter around a lot. You know, even though he went.
Mention.
And my friend Malcolm Holcomb, I don't know if you're familiar with him. One of my all-time favorite. He just passed in March, and I can't hardly stand it. But Malcolm's like that too. He was so big, and I still hear him talking to me all the time. And he was so funny. Malcolm would call me up, and we'd both just laugh till we had to stop. But if you haven't heard Malcolm, I would strongly suggest getting some of his. You can still get his CDs too. Beautiful, beautiful. Nobody liked him really. I'll tell you a little story about Malcolm. I hadn't met Malcolm. This was about, I don't know, 8 or 10 years ago. I'd been a fan of his, but I had never met him. And one day, I'm driving around by the city and I get a call, and it's Malcolm calling me up. And we talked for about 15, 20 minutes. It was great. And I finally said, well, Malcolm, I'm going to let you get back to whatever you're doing. I'm really glad to get to talk to you a little bit. And Malcolm said, well, wait a minute, there's one other thing. I'm doing this new record. It's kind of a folk record. And I thought, oh, compared to those salsa records. I said, yeah. And he said, well, there's this one girl. He still calls women girl. He's from the South. There's one girl I think would sound really great on there. And I said, would that be my wife, maybe? Iris? Well, yeah, that's what I was. And I said, well, just call her up. She's very nice. And, oh, I couldn't do that. And I said, okay, I've got quite a few of your CDs. I'll play some of her CDs for you. I know she's gonna love them. And then I'll have her call you up and say, if she'll come record. Oh, that'd be great, man. That'd be great. And so that's the way Malcolm and I met. And we did go. We went, and Iris sang beautifully on that record, Malcolm's. So yeah, music just helps us all so much, I think, and it's just a great thing. Beautiful. I don't know what we would ever do without it. So, well, I'm going to try to sing a couple songs.
Great.
So the tab.
Some say that heaven is beyond the blue. I've done some looking. I don't think that's true. Looking up from the flat land, birds and clouds floating by. I'd say that heaven's about 1,000 foot high. It's my home sky. My home in the sky. Oh, the hawks make the circles through which the swallows fly. When the world is too much, down on my back I lie. I look up with longing at my home in the sky. Well, I don't need no angels with big chicken wings, or halos or harps. I don't need none of those things. Want to do what the thunderheads get to do. See the sunrise and the moon set from a new point of view. Oh, it's my home in the sky. My home in the sky. Oh, the hawk makes the circles through which the swallows fly. When the world is too much, down on my back I lie. I look up with longing at sad little details. Put my soul's master, stretch out my sails. But when my life is over, it's time to go. I'd like to see how you're all doing below. From my home in the sky, my home in the sky. Oh, the hogs make the circles through which the swallows fly. When the world is too much, down on my back I lie, and I look up with longing, my home in the sky. Well, thank you very much, and thank you for coming out here to this great place. Somebody should make a movie in here, I think.
Thank you.
There's a little old creek used to cross. Jimmy and me took that one last toss, so I spent it right in the evening air. People always said there ain't no fishing there. Grown-ups, they ain't always right. Jimmy and I walked on slow that night down Main Street. Here flyers with 2 5-pound bass making grown men liars. Oh, Jimmy, if I had known, I might have stopped fishing right there. It's just as well that we don't know when things will never be that good again. No, no, no. Hey, ride on and on. It's about 15 if I remember right. We're far apart at the start of the ride. Somehow we ended up sitting side by side. Oh, it hit a little bump and she grabbed my arm. The night was as cold as her lips were warm. I shivered as her hand held mine on, and I kissed her one more time. Oh, gee, if I had known, I might have stopped kissing right then. It's just as well that we don't know when things will never be that good again. No, no, no. Than me, I guess. Summer was invented for her to wear that dress, so I knew about risk. She knew about proof. That night she put me up on her roof, and we could see the lights of the little town. Watch the autumn stars fall down. The shooting stars and the meteorites. We went on a ride through the big sky that night, and oh, if I had known, I'd do it all over again. Some things just get better, better, better than they've already been.
Thanks.